I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who doubted his wife. Hell, I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who even had a wife. But here I am, watching Callista flit around our bedroom, getting ready for another work event. 7 years. 7 years we've been married. And until recently I thought we had it all figured out. I busted my ass on job sites, building a life for us brick by brick. Callista stayed home with Max for a while, then went back to a marketing gig. We were solid. At least I thought we were. But lately, I don't know. Something's off. Callista's different. The way she dresses, the way she acts, it's like she's become a stranger in our own home. Tonight she's wearing some tight little number that I've never seen before. Definitely not the kind of thing you'd wear to a business meeting. I want to say something, but the words get stuck in my throat. I'm not good at this stuff, talking about feelings, confronting issues, so I just stand there, leaning against the doorframe, watching her apply another coat of lipstick. Another late night I manage to ask, trying to keep my voice neutral. Callista barely glances at me. You know how it is, clients to entertain. I nod, even though she's not looking. Yeah, I know how it is. Or at least I thought I did. I watched Callista as she got ready for yet another work event, my stomach twisting into knots. She slipped on a dress I'd never seen before, its hemline shorter than anything she used to wear. The neckline plunged low, revealing more skin than I was comfortable with her showing to her so-called clients. Another late night I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Callista barely glanced at me as she applied her lipstick. You know how it is, Magnus, gotta keep the clients happy. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. These events seemed to be happening more and more frequently, and each time she came home later, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers. As the weeks went by, my unease grew. Callista's behavior became more erratic, her explanations more vague. I found myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of her key in the lock. One evening, I decided to attend a work function with her. The moment we walked in, I felt out of place. The music was too loud, the drinks flowing freely. Callista immediately disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing awkwardly by the bar. That's when I saw her with Sarah, the two of them laughing and whispering together. Sarah handed Callista a drink, and I watched as my wife downed it in one go. Then Sarah leaned in, her lips brushing Callista's ear as she spoke. Whatever she said made Callista throw her head back in laughter, her hand resting on the arm of a man I didn't recognize. I tried to push down the jealousy rising in my chest. This wasn't the Callista I knew. The woman I married wouldn't act like this, wouldn't dismiss my concerns so easily. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she accused me of being controlling, of not trusting her. You're suffocating me, Magnus, she'd say, her eyes flashing with anger. I'm allowed to have a life outside of you and Max. I wanted to argue, to tell her that this wasn't about having a life outside our family. It was about the growing distance between us, the secret she seemed to be keeping. But I swallowed my words, not wanting to push her further away. As I stood there, watching Callista laugh and flirt with strangers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. The woman I loved was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized, and I had no idea how to bring her back. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Callista and I used to be so close, but now it felt like we were living separate lives under the same roof. Every night she'd come home late, her perfume mingled with the scent of alcohol and cigarettes. I'd pretend to be asleep, listening to her fumble with her keys and giggle at her phone. One evening I was sitting in the living room, trying to focus on some work emails when Callista breezed in. She barely acknowledged me, her eyes glued to her phone screen. I watched her, feeling like a stranger in my own home. How was your day, I asked, trying to initiate some kind of conversation. She glanced up, as if surprised to see me there. Oh, you know, busy. Then she was back to her phone, thumbs tapping away. I sighed, turning back to my laptop. The silence between us was deafening. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of Callista's phone buzzing. She'd fallen asleep with it on the nightstand. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached over and picked it up, the bright screen illuminating the dark room. A message notification caught my eye. Tyler, the name was unfamiliar, but the message preview made my blood run cold. You looked amazing last night. Can't wait to see you again. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands shook as I put the phone back, careful not to wake Callista. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The next morning, I watched Callista get ready for work. She seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil, chattering about some client meeting. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation? So I said nothing. I kissed her goodbye and watched her drive away, the knot in my stomach growing tighter. But as the days passed, I couldn't ignore the signs, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd pull away when I tried to touch her. I began to pay closer attention to her behavior, hoping to find some evidence that would prove my suspicions wrong. But with each passing day, the reality became harder to deny. My wife, the woman I built my life with, was slipping away from me. I couldn't help but feel the growing distance between Callista and me. It was like watching a chasm slowly open up, and I was powerless to stop it. I found myself retreating into a cold, emotionless shell. Why bother asking where she was going anymore? The lies had become so routine, I could practically recite them myself. Night after night, I'd come home late from the job site, hoping she'd already be asleep. Sometimes I'd crash on the couch, telling myself it was just because I didn't want to wake her. But deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't stand lying next to her, smelling another man's cologne on her skin. When she tried to kiss me goodbye in the mornings, I'd turn my cheek or busy myself with some meaningless task. The spark that once lit up our relationship had long since fizzled out, leaving nothing but cold ashes in its wake. I buried myself in work, taking on more projects than I could handle, anything to keep my mind off the gnawing suspicion that ate away at me day and night. It was easier this way, I told myself. Better to be numb than to feel the constant pain of betrayal. I watched as Callista's behavior became even more erratic. Her nights out multiplied, and her excuses grew increasingly vague. Oh, just drinks with the girls, she'd say, not even bothering to look me in the eye anymore. I'd see her texting furiously, a small smile playing on her lips, and I knew it wasn't me making her happy. Sarah, that toxic friend of hers, was always around now. I'd overhear snippets of their conversations, full of giggles and whispers. You deserve to have fun, Sarah would say. Magnus is so boring. You've been tied down for too long. Each word was like a knife in my gut, but I didn't let it show. I'd become an expert at masking my emotions, at pretending I didn't care. Let Callista believe what she wanted. Let her think I was the problem. It was easier than facing the truth of what our marriage had become. I'd been watching Callista like a hawk for weeks now. Every move, every text, every little lie she told. I cataloged it all in my head. It was like I'd become some kind of detective, piecing together the puzzle of my wife's betrayal. One night, I waited until she was in the shower to grab her phone. My fingers shook as I scrolled through her messages. There it was, a string of flirty texts with someone named Tyler. Can't wait to see you tonight, he'd written. My stomach churned. I put the phone down and retreated to my office before she finished showering. As I heard her getting ready, applying makeup and picking out another new outfit I'd never seen before, I buried myself in work emails, anything to distract from the pain. The next day, I found myself scrolling through Callista's Instagram. There she was, arm draped around Sarah at some club I'd never heard of, both of them grinning widely, drinks in hand. I zoomed in on the background, trying to spot this Tyler guy. Just heading out for drinks with the girls Callista called as she breezed past me that evening. Another lie. I grunted in response, not even looking up from my laptop. Let her think I didn't care. As the days passed, my resentment grew. Every vague excuse, every late-night work event added fuel to the fire burning inside me. But I said nothing. I retreated further into myself, letting Callista believe I was the problem. Then came the night that broke me. I was in the kitchen when I heard Callista's phone ring. Her voice drifted down the hallway, soft and playful. No, Magnus won't care. It's just a party. Don't worry. Worry. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. The casual way she dismissed me, our marriage, it was too much. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. Whatever scraps of trust I'd been clinging to evaporated. I didn't confront her. Not yet. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to Callista's steady breathing beside me, I made a decision. I was going to find out exactly what she was hiding, no matter what it took. I watched Callista leave, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment now. I kept a safe distance behind her, my headlights off as I trailed her through the dark streets. My stomach churned with every turn, knowing each mile brought us closer to the truth I'd been dreading for weeks. When Callista pulled up to Sarah's house, I parked a block away and killed the engine. The neighborhood was alive with the sound of music and laughter spilling out from the brightly lit house. I watched as Callista sauntered up the driveway, her hips swaying in that damn dress. She didn't even hesitate at the door, just waltzed right in like she owned the place. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm in there, to confront her in front of everyone. But I knew I needed more. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I got out of the car, my legs feeling like lead as I crept towards the house. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap in one of the windows. I edged closer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. Through that narrow slice of glass, I saw her. Callista, my wife, the mother of my child, draped over some guy I'd never seen before. His hands were all over her, and she was laughing, tilting her head back as she downed another drink. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the air left my lungs, and for a second I thought I might be sick right there on Sarah's manicured lawn. But then something else took over, a cold, hard anger that spread through my chest like ice. I stood there, watching, as Callista flitted from one guy to another, flirting shamelessly. Sarah was right beside her, egging her on, refilling her glass. I saw Tyler too, the bastard from the text messages. He couldn't keep his eyes off her. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, letting the reality of it all sink in. My marriage was over. It had been over for a long time, and I'd been too blind, too damn stubborn to see it. I parked my truck down the street from Sarah's house, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as I watched the party unfold. The music pulsed through the night air, accompanied by raucous laughter and the occasional shriek. People stumbled in and out of the house, drinks in hand, oblivious to my presence. My heart raced as I sat there, debating my next move. Should I confront Callista now or wait? The longer I stayed in the truck, the more my anger built up, a pressure cooker of emotions threatening to explode. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see for myself what was happening inside that house. With grim determination, I stepped out of the truck. Each step towards Sarah's place felt heavy, like I was walking through quicksand. The music grew louder as I approached, drowning out the sound of my own ragged breathing. I pushed my way into the crowded house, ignoring the drunken bodies that stumbled into my path. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and sweat. My eyes scanned the room, searching for Callista among the sea of unfamiliar faces. The pit in my stomach grew with every second that passed. I made my way upstairs, drawn by the faint sound of laughter coming from behind a closed door. My hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment before I steeled myself and pushed it open. The scene that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Callista was there, perched on the lap of a man I recognized as Tyler from the text messages. Her arms were draped around his neck, her head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. She was wearing that new dress I'd seen her in earlier, the one that had made me so uncomfortable. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The music faded away, and all I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. Callista's eyes met mine, and I saw the moment of recognition flash across her face, followed quickly by shock and then defiance. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. The room spun, a nauseating whirl of flesh and betrayal. Callista, my wife, the mother of our child, was sprawled across the bed with strangers, 5 of them. The stench of booze and sweat hit me like a physical blow. My eyes locked onto Callista's face. Her usually vibrant green eyes were dull, unfocused. She stared back at me, but there was no recognition, no shame, no anything. Just a vacant expression that told me she was too far gone to even realize what she'd done. I felt my chest tighten, each breath becoming harder to draw. The world narrowed to this moment, this betrayal laid bare before me. Everything we'd built together, 15 years of marriage, countless memories, all of it crumbled to dust in an instant. My fists clenched at my sides, knuckles turning white. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the room apart, but I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. The shock had rendered me mute, paralyzed. One of the men, was it Tyler? Finally noticed me. He nudged Callista, slurring something I couldn't make out. She giggled, the sound piercing my heart like a knife. It was a stranger's laugh, belonging to someone I no longer knew. I felt hollowed out, gutted. Every suspicion, every doubt I'd harbored these past months crashed over me. I'd known, deep down, that something was wrong, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. The room started to blur as tears welled up in my eyes. I blinked them back furiously, refusing to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I sat there, frozen in my truck, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. The engine hummed quietly, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Callista, my wife, sprawled across that bed with those strangers. The stench of alcohol and sweat still clung to my nostrils, making me feel sick. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to let out all the rage and pain that was building up inside me, but I couldn't. It was like all my emotions had been sucked out of me, leaving nothing but a cold, hard emptiness. Without really thinking about it, I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't look back at the house, at the party still in full swing. I just drove, letting the familiar streets guide me home. Home, the word felt hollow now. As I pulled into our driveway, I realized it wasn't home anymore. It was just a house, a shell of memories that now felt tainted and false. I walked in, the silence engulfing me. The house was dark and cold, mirroring the void inside me. I flicked on the kitchen light and sat at the table, staring blankly into the darkness beyond the window. My mind kept replaying the scene one had witnessed, Callista's vacant expression, her laughter that sounded so foreign to my ears, the way she hadn't even recognized me standing there in the doorway. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours, it all blurred together. I wanted to feel something, anything. Anger. sadness, betrayal. But there was nothing, just a deep, unshakable numbness. Part of me wanted to pack a bag, grab Max from his grandparents' house where he was staying for the night, and just leave and never look back. But I couldn't bring myself to move. The thought of Max, our innocent son who had no idea his world was about to be turned upside down, kept me rooted to the spot. The sound of keys jingling and the front door opening snapped me out of my trance. Callista's heels clacked loudly on the hardwood floor as she stumbled in. I could hear her fumbling with her keys, trying to be quiet and failing miserably. She walked into the kitchen, freezing when she saw me sitting at the table. Her eyes widened. A mix of surprise and something else. Guilt, maybe? She forced a weak smile, her words slurring slightly as she spoke. "You're still up?" "What, couldn't sleep?" I didn't respond. I just stared at her, my face a mask of indifference. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Callista's smile faltered, her expression turning confused, then worried. "Magnus, what's going on?" she asked, her voice wavering. I stood up slowly, my eyes never leaving hers. When I spoke, my voice was low and emotionless. "I saw everything." "Callista." The color drained from her face. Her eyes widened in shock, then understanding. The gravity of the situation seemed to hit her all at once, sobering her up instantly. "Magnus, I can explain," she stammered, taking a step towards me. I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," I said, my voice still devoid of emotion. "There's nothing to explain. I saw you with those people. In that bed." Callista's face crumpled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Tears started to form in her eyes. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger. Just emptiness. "How could you?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "How could you do this to us?" "To Max." At the mention of our son's name, Callista let out a choked sob. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Magnus. I never meant for this to happen. I don't know what I was thinking." I laughed then, a hollow sound that seemed to echo in the quiet kitchen. "You weren't thinking, Callista. That's the problem. You weren't thinking about me, or Max, or our family. You were only thinking about yourself." Callista reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I stepped back. The thought of her hands on me after what I had seen made my skin crawl. "Please," she begged, "we can work this out. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Magnus, please don't give up on us." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman standing before me was a stranger, the Callista I had married. The mother of my child was gone. Maybe she had never really existed at all. "There is no us anymore," I said quietly. "You made sure of that tonight." Days after that event, I sat at my kitchen table, staring blankly at the divorce papers in front of me. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had been my life for the past few days. I'd already made up my mind there was no saving our marriage. Callista had destroyed everything we built together. Without hesitation, I filled out the paperwork. Each stroke of the pen felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. The cold, clinical nature of the documents matched the emotional distance I'd created between myself and Callista. When the papers were served, I watched Callista's face crumble under the weight of her guilt. She tried to plead, to explain, but I cut her off each time. "Don't," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "There's nothing left to say." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. The woman I once loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who betrayed me in the worst way possible. I focused all my energy on Max. He was the only thing that mattered now. I made sure the divorce proceedings were as quick and painless as possible for our son. I secured joint custody, knowing that despite everything, Max shouldn't lose both parents. Every legal meeting was a test of my resolve. I sat across from Callista, my face a mask of indifference. There were no tears, no fights, just the steady, inevitable end of our marriage. As the weeks passed, I found a new rhythm to my life. I moved into a modest apartment, decorating it sparsely, but making sure to create a warm, welcoming space for Max on the weekends. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, using them as a distraction from the pain that still lingered beneath the surface, but it no longer consumed me the way it once had. My focus shifted entirely to being the best father I could be. I spent every possible moment with Max, taking him to the park, helping him with schoolwork, or just watching cartoons together on lazy Sunday mornings. "Dad, can we build a fort?" Max asked one weekend, his eyes bright with excitement. "Of course, buddy," I replied, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face. "Let's see how big we can make it." As we piled pillows and blankets in the living room, I felt the bond between us grow stronger. Max, young as he was, sensed the change in our family dynamic, but he thrived on the stability I provided. Callista remained part of Max's life, but our interactions were minimal. We barely spoke beyond the essentials of co-parenting. Our encounters were brief, transactional, filled with polite, empty words. Max had a great time at the zoo, she'd say, dropping him off. Good to hear, I'd reply, my voice devoid of emotion. See you next week. And that was it. I was done with her, emotionally and physically. The woman I once thought I'd spend my life with was now just a footnote in my past. Slowly, I began to rebuild. Each day was a step towards a new life, one where I was stronger for having left the past behind. The betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. As I tucked Max into bed one night, he looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. Dad, are you happy? He asked. I paused, considering the question. I'm happy when I'm with you, buddy, I answered honestly, and that's what matters most. He smiled, satisfied with the answer, and drifted off to sleep. I stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment. Despite everything, I had this, the love of my son, and the strength to move forward. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life worth living.